Greetings. This lesson is so short that perhaps even Uncle Larry will attend to it. We begin with history, a smidgen of 1st century and 18th century history and a touch of Bible. These have merged to form a question for which I do not have an answer, and I sincerely hope you do. In 1760, the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, ended. These military festivities left England broke. How broke? Well, 60% of the Crown's yearly income was employed to service just the interest on the debt. Predictably, England turned to its American colonies for financial help. This resulted in a series of ill-conceived taxes that increasingly impoverished the colonists. At the same time, the colonies' influence in Parliament and with the king was diminishing. As these irritations grew, so blossomed protests. Escalation was assured by England's failure to attend these issues. By 1775, hostilities between the two were well underway. Yet, separation of the colonies from Britain was not a popular proposition. In May of 1775, George Washington is reported to have said, "If you ever hear of my joining any such measures," meaning independence, "you have my leave to set me down for everything wicked." Jefferson, Franklin, Hancock, and Adams, and others as well, were of a similar mind. These were believers, and the sentiment, God is a God of order and not of confusion, and he commands you to submit to your rulers and to be obedient to a higher power, the higher power for the conscience sake, was dominant. Those verses or ideas come from 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 15, and 1 Corinthians 14:33. On January 9, 1776, while there were serious grievances with the Crown, most hoped to continue the relationship. 2 days later, on January 11, 1776, all hope evaporated. Why? By coincidence, 2 publishing events occurred on January 10th. First, Mad King George III's speech to the colonies, filled with arrogance and insensitivity to the colonists' plights, and mandates for obedience, was published in the colonies. The colonists were furious. Second, on the same day, Thomas Paine's pamphlet entitled Common Sense was published, America's very first bestseller. Although diametrically opposed, these 2 publications joined to blow to smithereens the relationship. The colonists' rebellion was justified on the grounds of economic hardship, political arrogance, royal arrogance, inconvenience, and confiscation of property. However, until the war fully blossomed, the loss of colonists' lives was minimal. Back to the past. Tacitus, a 1st century historian, briefly mentioned Christian martyrdom under Nero in 64 AD. He wrote, "In their very deaths they were made the subjects of sport, for they were covered with hides of wild beasts and worried to death by dogs, or nailed to crosses, or set fire to, and when the day waned, burned to serve for the evening's lights." It is thought that 1 Peter was written between 65 and 68 AD. There's a significance to this date. Peter wrote the following passage after Nero's horrific martyrdom of Christians. "Submit yourselves, for the Lord's sake, to every human institution, whether to a king, as one in authority, or to governors, as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and the praise of those who do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Act as free men, and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bondslaves of God. Honor all men. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the king. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 17. I do not believe Peter led a protest march against the injustices of Rome. He did not lead a political rebellion. He continued to preach Christ and failed to attack the grave injustices he and Christians were enduring. Just preaching was enough for him to be martyred. The colonists of 1760 onward greatly suffered. However, their misery did not match that of Nero's victims. For the most part, the founders of the United States of America were Bible-believing Christians. They were known to quote 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 17 in support of their allegiance to the crown. It appears to me that on January 10th, the founders tossed aside their adherence to Scripture to pursue rebellion. Did they have scriptural justification, or was 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 17 tossed aside as being inconvenient? I am sincerely troubled. Considering the historical context of 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 through 17, especially being written after 64 AD's massacre, is there a scriptural mechanism the founders employed for setting aside Peter's thoughts on submission to the king? I cannot find one, but I'm not without error. Was the founders' rebellion scriptural or not? Help me. What do you think? Don't leave my old self hanging, please. Well, thank you for watching, and I look forward to your response. Until then, God bless you and yours.